Howdy, howdy, fellow movie watchers, and welcome back for another edition of the Wisco Movie Watchers podcast, brought to you by PTE Creative. As always, we are your hosts, Dylan Davies, and our favorite movie expert, who doesn't piss off Cole Sprouse fans, Dylan Davies. Today we are full swing into Halloween prep here, so we're going to be doing our top 10 horror movies, and this is a personal ranking show before anyone gets into the how could you rank that above this. It's a personal ranking show. We're not going to try to give you the quality. We're not going to try to give you the false watch mojo style where it's like, this is clearly the best, because who the fuck cares?
Our list will be very different.
And I can guarantee you our list will be extremely different from each other, because that's just how we watch movies and what we like. We'll be doing our traditional style, in which if one of us does have a similar one, we'll talk about it at the higher spot on the list as opposed to the lower spot. But let's get straight into it. Any honorable mentions that you want to just quick, brief mention here, Dylan?
Yeah, I got a couple written down. I got Trick or Treat.
Okay.
Halloween 4.
Interesting.
The Conjuring. Friday the 13th, Part 2 and Part 4. Sinister. And then I have one that I was really, really tempted to put on the list, but I have only seen it the one time, and I just watched it a couple weeks ago. I told you about it. It was Talk to Me.
Okay.
Which just came out a couple years ago. I think eventually it will probably be right in my top 5 eventually, but I don't know that for certain right now.
Yeah, you gotta settle on it, yeah. Okay. Anyone specifically that you're like, hey, check out? Because it is odd to hear that many different parts of franchises that are not cohesive. Granted, the horror genre isn't very cohesive when it comes to series.
When it comes to Halloween and Friday the 13th, you can watch any part and you're fine. Yeah. They have no continuity. It doesn't matter. Just watch any of them that you enjoy.
Just watch the movie, and if you enjoy it, you enjoy it. Interesting there. I do like that. Personally, Halloween, the only one I've ever really liked is the one that gets shit on all the time, but has a cult following, and it's Part 3, Season of the Witch, because it's so removed from the rest of it.
I think that's really grown in esteem, though, I think.
Well, it's because it's a more coherent film. To be fair, I'm talking... I think the last time I saw that movie had to be at least 10 years ago, if not 12. Like, I'm getting memories of possibly watching that in Ab's dorm room, Marquette. Like, it's a long time ago. So, it's been a while since my wife was at Marquette, and I was an honorary student there because I just did so much crap there. So, we'll have to see that one. But interesting honorable mentions there. I got 2 honorable mentions. One is Werewolf by Night, which was just done by Marvel 2-3 years ago. It's really 45 minutes or just under an hour. Also directed by Michael Giacchino, the composer, so it's a very interesting one to get to. Actually does a pretty good job, and I like the throwback to black and white. I like the playing in a modern world that people really enjoy, but yet it's its own thing. It doesn't go into Avengers territory or anything like that. Just a fun watch, very quick. If you ever want to get into the Halloween spirit, but you're like, dude, I don't have the time to watch an hour and a half, 2 hours. Werewolf by Night, Disney Plus, easy watch. I enjoy it. I think it's fun. A second one that actually did free.
Does he do the score to it as well?
I think so. It's very interesting where he it was like Michael Giacchino was like, oh, so we're throwing a bone to our composer here. And I was like, oh shit, no, he actually is pretty decent at this. Obviously, with Marvel, it's a little bit different because they previs so much of the movie out. It's not as much of... It's not so much our tour directors going out and like making their movie. Yeah. Which is why you can tell like Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is so different. Because it's very much like Marvel previses it, but Sam Raimi's also putting his very direct spin on it, so it's interesting. A second honorable mention for me, one that actually did freak me out upon watch, was The Descent. The idea of weird mutant freaks deep in caves in a claustrophobic environment with no light, yeah, that sucks. That actually would freak me out.
I know a lot of people that just refuse to watch that movie because it's like a triggering idea for a movie.
It is. It's so smart to play on your natural fears of things, and as someone who loves national park stuff and wanting to dive into do things such as cave diving from time to time, like, maybe we don't have to go that deep.
I wouldn't do that shit.
We don't need to go that deep. Like going in the ice caves and walking down, but I can still see the light. I'm like, okay, we're fine.
Yeah.
Going all the way down to subterranean layers, so I'm like, like when we did Mammoth Cave down in Kentucky, there is definitely a part of me that, like, they have so many caves that aren't lit, or so many tunnels in those caves that aren't lit, and I'm like, that's because of the freaks are there, and I ain't playing that shit. Like, I'm staying to the lit path. So it is somewhat interesting and fun. But take us off, number 10. Where are you going?
My number 10 is The Witch.
Okay, not on my list. It's definitely one of those movies that you've recommended that it's always on the docket and I want to watch it, and every time I'm like, I should watch it. I'm just never in the mood for it, but I want to watch it.
It's kind of one of those movies where, like, you really have to enjoy filmmaking to enjoy it as a horror movie itself, because really it's really not a scary movie per se. Like, if you're just telling, like, your dad to watch The Witch, he's not going to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not going to be enjoyable for an average moviegoer. But it's just, like, pure mood. It's a pure mood piece.
And I love that.
Where, like, yeah, all you're getting is atmosphere. And one of the really cool things is, like, Robert Eggers, the director, he went, like, full period accurate. So, like, all the dialogue in it is period accurate, where they're talking just like they would in the Salem times, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's a very different style of English than we are used to. You're coming,
yes, definitely.
At that time, you're coming into the modern English era for a couple hundred years, but you're still not modern English as we would say it, especially as American viewers. So it's an interesting piece. I love the atmosphere build, and I think... Do you have any other notes on that to share, or is that, like, kind of hit it? Because I actually do have a transition that works pretty well here.
No, the only thing I would say is, like, if you're going to watch it, just be ready to see, like, a couple surreal things in it. But okay. Yeah, that gets it.
And obviously, I know it gets a ton of attention post-movie because of Anya Taylor-Joy, who's phenomenal in everything. She does everything. Yeah. She's good in everything she does.
Yeah.
I mean, shit, she's good in New Mutants, and that thing's completely incoherent. But I love fucking Anya Taylor-Joy in that movie. So she's just great. I think atmosphere is certainly something that I love. Atmosphere. It's a thing in which can take a mediocre movie to as far as great for me, which kind of takes me to number 10. It's a movie that a lot of modern watchers that haven't watched it are probably not going to enjoy, but it's so part of the zeitgeist. I have Psycho at number 10.
Can't talk about it yet.
Yeah, it's just for the atmosphere, so I'll save that for later. But Psycho number 10, that was a movie that I'm
assuming you're talking about the original and not
the
remake.
The original 1960, yes, black and white, not Vince Vaughn's remake. I've never watched the remake. It took me 32 years to watch the original. I don't think I'm gonna be.
You literally, there's no point. It's a shot-for-shot remake.
Yeah, so why do it?
Yeah, it's really pointless, honestly.
Alright, interesting. Now, before we head on over to our top 9, we got a quick message for you, and we'll be right back, folks. See you here. I hear you guys are really liking PT Creative's content. And you know what? You should, because it's pretty rad. You may even want to support the channel even more. Well, there's a way you can do it and reward yourself. And that's by going to our Etsy shop. Head on over to PTE Creative's Etsy shop, and you can find all kinds of cool merch like you see on screen. You may be watching some of our Pokemon themed content and going, I'd love some merch there. You can do that. You can even get our custom Fakemon stickers right there, or stickers of existing Pokemon, t-shirts, or mystery packs. But you may be saying, I don't know if Pokemon's maybe my vibe. You know what? That's fine, because we have all kinds of fun, snarky millennial content and sports-related things over at the Etsy shop as well. You got some big bench warmer energy that you just got to spread with the world. Or maybe you just need to tell people that you hope both teams are having fun as they're playing, because it's just all about vibes to you, and you hate to see it. You'd hate to see it if you didn't get your merch. You can go get that merch right here, right now. Head on over to Etsy. Go to etsy.com/shop/PTE Creative and go get yourself some awesome merch and go support a local content creator in this community we call the internet. Hope y'all see some great merch coming soon from Etsy. Go to PTE Creative on Etsy and get yourself some great merch. No! Alright, thank you guys for listening to that message. Hopefully you can check out our Etsy shop and support the show that way. We'd love to hear from you in that. And go get yourself some cool merch. Number 9. You want to take this one or you want me to go?
I'll go next, I guess. Right. These next 3 are actually the 3 movies that I would say the 3 movies that actually scared me the most when I first saw them.
Okay.
So the first one is Jordan Peele's Us.
Okay.
I love that movie. I was terrified when I first saw it.
Us is definitely a movie. I have not watched Us, but I know a ton of Us. I actually helped produce a Us-themed haunted house, of all things. When I was working at the youth center I used to work at in Chicago, every year used to turn their locker rooms into big haunted houses, and that's what they do Halloween Fest. It was always really fun because it was always driven by the teenagers in the art program. And then magically, somehow my classes would kind of get canceled around that time because it was just like, he's going to go down there anyways. Just let him go because the product's better. Like after one day, they're like, oh, this is so much easier with him here. Just let him go. So I would just park down there and just work with the kids for like 7-8 hours at a time. But they had really good pieces about it, and the mirror images and the different personalities that you're getting from these doppelganger characters is really interesting in Us.
I was gonna say for a modern take on a haunted house. That's a really good take on it. Yeah. Is Us.
Yeah, so it was certainly something that was fun, and then of course you have your classics put in that haunted house too. But it was certainly the movie of the time when we were working with them. Sure. Yeah, it was 2019. It was like fresh off the release, and so I was like, okay, I get it. Like, that's cool.
Yeah, it goes along with my next pick as well. It's like, I think the scariest thing is probably home invasion. Like that is just gets right down to the core of it. Like, it's a terrifying thought.
It's a terrifying thought that someone comes in your home and fucks you up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so Us plays with a lot of stuff. Would you say Us does Us keep up with Get Out? Get Out to me is obviously like Peele's best work.
Get Out. Yeah, I think Get Out is better film, but I think Us is more terrifying.
Okay, interesting. But I thoroughly enjoy that piece. It's always one of those that I'm like, I gotta watch that. But I know so much about the movie, and I know the twist. I also know the twist, so I'm kind of like,
sure, yeah, that always kind of ruins it a little bit.
I'm like, okay, well, I know what's going to happen. That doesn't mean I will say a lot of good modern horror movies do a good job in which, even if there is a twist, that doesn't mean you can't watch the movie and enjoy it, because you're going to pick up a lot of good stuff along the way. You know, it's not like Sixth Sense where if you know the twist, you're like, why am I watching this then? You know? Yeah.
Also, I would say like Us is the twist in it isn't like, it's not a delayed twist. It's not at the very end you find something out.
Yeah.
It's not like a last second twist. You figure it out pretty early, actually.
Yeah.
So it's not ruined or anything.
Gotcha. Number 9 for me, modern one. It's the modern version of It. I love.
Okay, yep.
You're gonna see a lot of atmosphere on my stuff. I love the atmosphere of It. I love the paranoia of It. Does it help that it has slightly Stranger Things vibes now? Yes, especially to a modern audience that loves Stranger Things, myself included. However, I love the way they interact with Pennywise. I love the morphing sequences of how Pennywise goes after people. I think that's just so smart, and that's really, ironically enough, when I speak to Stephen King book readers, they're usually some of the only book readers that actually prefer the movie half the time, unless it's just like really bad, because the movie ends up being more coherent. And some of the wild shit. Like, I remember when you told me about It, the book, and I was like, "Wait, what?"
There's a lot of fucked up shit in it. Yeah,
and like when he was just in his 80s cocaine fueled. Why don't we do this? Like,
yeah,
you're like, okay. But I really, really love the atmosphere building there. The setting. There's just something so well done about how they portray Derry in that film. It Part 2 is fine. I like it, but it's not nearly the same as Part 1. I think Part 1's by far.
Yeah, unfortunately, I really dislike that second part, so it kind of tarnished the first one a little bit for me.
I didn't hate it, but I was not nearly as impressed as I was.
Yeah, the funny thing is, I saw it when I moved up to Park Falls, which if for anyone listening who doesn't know, Park Falls, Wisconsin is about a town of 2,000 people, maybe.
I was gonna say it's a small town,
and the theater there is like one of those old theaters, no like amenities at all. It's just those old theater seats that fold down, and that's it.
Yep.
And then it's just one slanted level.
Oh, nice.
It was like the most uncomfortable seats you'll ever see, the worst sound you'll ever hear. And then like,
I honestly probably fed the movie for you.
Yeah, it wasn't, because it was really weird because it was like actually a packed theater, so probably like, I don't know, 150 people maybe.
Okay.
But it was really weird because it was like a really small town.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was odd seeing a movie like that.
No, it works very well for that milieu. It's certainly something which I've never actually been in one of those theaters. Even when we are near a small town and we end up catching a movie, somehow we always end up at a bigger theater that's kind of like on the outskirts of town of like a bigger city. So you don't see a lot of those. Also, Marcus Theaters dominates our state, and as much as every movie theater company has problems, but I will say Marcus just does it really well for the most part. And so you have no idea how happy I was that for Deadpool and Wolverine, I made damn sure we were back for Friday. Like when we were moving, I just moved back to Madison, Wisconsin, or moved to Wisconsin, and I was like, Deadpool and Wolverine's coming out the Friday that we're supposed to leave. Sure as shit, we're getting back for this fucking movie. We're getting back for this movie. So Friday night, opening night, I was like, we got everything done. We unpacked the car. We did as much as we possibly could. And I was like, we're taking a break. Get in the car. We're going to Deadpool and Wolverine. And you just sit in a Marcus Theater again. I was like, oh, thank God. This is so much better than half the stuff I was dealing with on the East Coast. Not that AMC does a bad job, but AMC is that like surface level nice, and then everything else around it is just kind of like meh. Marcus just has a cohesive touch that I really appreciate. But it is certainly one that I love the vibes of it. It's just fun, enjoyable. I'll go with number 8 here. I'm a big zombie movie guy. Love zombie movie genre. However, I'm going Fast Zombies. 28 Days Later is a movie that I adore. 28 Days Later. I love that it's classic zombie theming when zombie movies were starting to really break into being a lot bigger films that could tell more sophisticated stories where the zombies aren't the real threat. Obviously, they're the scare tactic. That's the thing that's always keeping you on edge as well. These things can get you at any time. And then especially when 28 Days Later is the first bigger movie of its genre where zombies become fast and they become these huge, giant threats that you're like, oh, fuck. But I love that it always comes back to the interplay of human beings being the problem. It's paranoid on two different levels, and then the seeds of mistrust are sown throughout that movie so well, and the atmosphere building.
Yeah, and for how low budget it is, the talent in it is crazy.
Well, they got a ton of talent early in their career, yeah.
Yeah, because you got Naomi Harris as the co-lead, and then you got Cillian Murphy as the lead.
Yep.
And then you have Danny Boyle, who, like, some people don't like Danny Boyle all that much, but I always really love he always has like a weird individualistic take on stuff. Like, no one's gonna shoot a movie like him.
Yes.
So, and I mean, he had already done a couple bigger movies. Like, Trainspotting's definitely bigger than 28 Days Later is.
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird that he goes down, like, pretty much to a micro budget, I would say.
Also, they accomplished so much with that budget, too. 28 Days Later is a testament to money is not the only thing. Money is obviously very important in producing a movie. With no money, you're not going to be able to produce something that's super grand and giant.
Yeah.
However, it's a huge way to tell you. It's a huge reminder of, you don't need to spend millions and billions of dollars on this thing just to make a good movie. You can make a good movie on a small budget. Also, main villain, that Brendan Gleeson, right? So another great actor in that.
Yes.
Yeah, and
also one of the Doctor Who actors is also in there.
Yeah.
Whoever was the first Doctor Who in the reboot. Can't remember his name.
Is it Peter Capaldi? Or is it the other one?
No, he was also a villain in Thor: The Dark World.
Oh, Eccleston. Yeah, I know. Chris Eccleston. Yeah.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah. Underrated actor. Thor: The Dark World kind of killed his career in a modern context. But it almost killed a franchise. So, that's what happens.
True.
And yet, I think I might enjoy that more than Thor Ragnarok. So it tells you a lot about how I feel about Thor in the modern context. But I just enjoy the atmosphere of that so much. And the pacing's done so well. When it slows down, there's still tension, but you can still get these heartfelt human moments to really give. I think what's balanced so well about that is they really do a good job in 28 Days Later, constantly giving you small little bitty reminders as to why you have to keep fighting in that context. I think there's a lot of modern movies, post-apocalyptic movies, zombie movies in general, in which the stakes are so obvious that they think they don't need to give you a moment to give a shit. And if they don't give you the moment to give a shit, you usually end up rooting for the zombies anyways, because then you're just like, well, why the fuck do I care? Like, I hope the zombies get this one.
That's kind of how I feel about World War Z. Is like, I don't really care about the human story aspect of that movie, so it's just like, and it's such a large, grand story that I'm like, okay. I mean, I guess I'll watch zombies fuck up the world.
I really do enjoy World War Z, but I can understand the criticism of it. I think at least they do a better job of trying to make the human element. It's a little too more like military operation as opposed to heartfelt family story. They do a really good job in Act 1 making it small and then growing. And I also love the fact that they're in Philly when things go to shit, because then Philly is the first thing you see destroyed, which makes it that much better. Not biased whatsoever. And also, we're recording this right after the Eagles lost on Monday Night Football, so it's a damn good day. But we'll transition from 28 Days Later. What is your number 8 movie?
Going back to the home invasion, this is probably the most scared I ever was watching a horror movie. It was The Strangers.
Ooh, Strangers is a vibe. There's a vibe.
Came out. It was like 2008. I think
2008. Liv Tyler.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a movie to just scare the shit out of you.
Yeah, I was like 14 when I watched it, and I remember just being so fucking scared of that movie. And it's like such a simple premise. It's really just a group of crazy people pretty much just tease you about invading your home while you're alone.
And they're just fucking with you. They're just constantly fucking with you, and it's again, that's not a big movie.
No, not at all.
That's the kind of movie that you can make on a shoestring budget, and as long as you get your lighting right, as long as you get your atmosphere right, it's going to be wildly successful. You could have shitty dialogue. You could almost have shitty acting to a degree, as long as it's not so bad that it takes you out of the movie, because the atmosphere is so strong, and the base fear of that movie is so strong, where you're just like, if this happened to me, I would die. And that's always the thing that freaks you out, right? Because that, as much as I love horror genre that really goes into monsters or all this other kind of stuff, at the end of the day, you're not really afraid that a monster's going to come out and get you.
Exactly.
But as an adult, you hear enough stories that you're like, home invasion could be a real thing, and that's fucked.
Yeah. Especially when you hear, when you know the background of, it's loosely based on the Manson family story, so...
Yeah.
Once you hear the actual horrific story about the real-life part of that, then it's like, okay, yeah, that's a pretty terrifying idea.
Right. Who's the male lead in that with Liv Tyler?
Oh crap, I can't remember his name. Is it Scott Speedman?
Yes, it's Speedman. Yeah, I saw his face and I was like, is that Speedman? But I'm not sure, because to me, he's most famous for Underworld.
That's what I most know him from too. And
Underworld is one of those franchises that I love the world, but the movies usually aren't that good. But I just love the world.
Yeah.
And I love Kate Beckinsale, so I'll do it.
Those movies fell off a fucking cliff too.
No shit. And it sucks because I love Kate Beckinsale in those movies, and I just love Kate Beckinsale. But I've been in love with Kate Beckinsale since the first moment I saw her, so I'm like, okay, I get that. But an interesting one nonetheless. Take us to your number 7.
My number 7, let me just make sure, I think it's my newest movie, Hereditary.
Okay.
Either that or Us. I can't remember which one's newer.
I think Us is newer than Hereditary, if I recall correctly.
Okay. Yeah, Hereditary is A24. I think it's a crime that Toni Collette wasn't nominated for an Oscar for her performance in it. She is amazing in that movie.
She is. Yes.
Horror movies obviously always get overlooked by all award shows, really.
Yeah.
But, that performance is a fucking powerhouse.
Yes.
It's amazing.
So, I will tell you this. I don't know if bored is the right word, but there was a little bit of that's it in this movie for me, because I heard so much about how good Hereditary was, but I can attest that Colette's performance is tremendous in that movie. That is such a good
movie. I watched it without knowing a single thing about it. I hadn't even seen the trailer or anything.
Okay. Yeah, I just heard constantly, Hereditary, and I was like, it's not what I was expecting. I will say the impetus for a lot of the events happening is wild and heartbreaking, and so it's just fuck, that's harsh, dude. Ari Aster, the director of it, I like Hereditary the most out of his films. I'm not particularly a fan of Midsommar.
Midsummer. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, it's Midsummer.
And then Beau is Afraid. I've only watched like half of that.
Okay.
So just wasn't for me.
Okay.
But for some reason, Hereditary really works for me.
The vibes are there. It's just such a weird. I think I just forgot it was an A24 movie. So the second you went, I went, oh, that explains so much about why.
Yeah.
A24 just makes weird stuff, and I'm here for it. I love the fact that there's a studio that does that.
Yeah, Talk to Me is also A24 as well.
I just think a lot of the time for me, A24 is pretty hit or miss. Where when they they hit.
They're mostly hit for me.
I usually like the vibe that they're giving because it's so strange. But I mean, to be fair, my exposure to A24 I think is only really 2 films, and I've seen pieces of other movies from A24. But certainly my most recent experience with A24 is The Green Knight, and that's just wildly weird, even compared to the source text, which is also extremely weird.
Yes.
So
I enjoy that movie.
And so it's just, A24 just does things differently, and there's the thing I will always give them is there's just always a weird, off-putting tension in the air of the movie.
Yes.
Even in scenes where you think you should be at ease, it always makes you doubt character motive so much. So I give them a lot of credit as a studio. And Hereditary, you're constantly being pushed with this theming of guilt and what guilt is doing to these people. I thought the ending was a little weak because it's a little too abstract, but at the same time, it's the tension and again the atmosphere knock it out of the park.
Yeah,
for me. So I thoroughly enjoy that.
I always I have so much admiration for A24 because it just doesn't feel like they meddle in any of the artistic decisions. You know,
very much so.
There are so many movies made nowadays that just feel like it's by committee.
Right. And I think that's... We live in a corporate society world of movies in which it's made by committee to assure it doesn't bomb.
Yeah.
But ironically enough, when you do that, it's usually by committee movies, or when you sense that it's by committee movies, it's usually what holds it back from being great. They might be fine, but even like bombs back in the day, they're still talked about as like fables, to where they've lived on forever because they are so bad.
Yeah, they made strong choices. They just made bad choices.
Right. So in no way, shape, or form is this an endorsement of quality. Like Halle Berry's Catwoman is so bad on so many levels, right? But because it was so uniquely bad, it has lived on forever to the point where streaming services seek out trying to get possession of that movie because they know people are going to watch it just for the, hey, you want to just drink and make fun of this fucking movie? They know they're going to get numbers off of it, and it's a fabled thing. Where when you just make movies that are fine, no one talks about you. Nobody cares. It's just like, you went to the theaters, you made a little bit of money, probably not your budget back, and then that just, you keep passing through.
I'd rather go watch Catwoman right now than go watch Black Widow.
Wow, that's a testament. That's a testament to an opinion right there.
I think Black Widow is one of the most mediocre movies made in the past 10 years.
I wish I could argue that, but yeah.
In terms of like what it could have been.
Yeah. Yeah, I could understand it. I don't agree. I don't ever want to watch Catwoman because that character means so much to me, and then to see it in weird fetish Barbie, I'm like, no, not interested. Just like, so it just violates so many tenets of the character. And I'm like, what are we doing here? What are we doing?
But it's so cool, dude.
And it was pretty much the end of Sharon Stone's career. So it's just even more like she was already on the edge. She was already teetering on the edge, and Catwoman was just like, here, let me help you.
For sure, yeah.
What a fall for that! What a fall for an actor. Like, she was so prominent in so many things.
That's the direct movie after Halle Berry won her Oscar too.
Yeah, that really derailed her career to a degree. She was doing so, like, even in Die Another Day, where you're like, this is a pretty meh would be a kind word to say about Die Another Day.
Yeah.
Even people that don't like Die Another Day usually end up liking Halle Berry's character in that movie. They're like, oh, I like Halle Berry in that movie because it's just different for Bond. It's still cheesy Bond at its finest, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a couple lines that she has that you're like, well, but there was still a likability to her where you're like, well, yeah, this movie ain't great, but I liked Halle Berry's character, you know?
Yeah.
And to go follow that with Catwoman, that completely derailed Halle Berry as like a leading woman. And that's the worst part, is she wins an Oscar, and it's such a classic tale in which the follow-up is arguably more important than the masterpiece.
Yeah.
Because she's definitely more remembered for Catwoman than she is for... What's the movie she went with? Was it Monsters Ball?
Monsters Ball, yeah.
She is certainly more remembered for Catwoman than she is for Monsters Ball.
Yeah.
The vast majority of people have never even seen Monsters Ball. Nor have I. I'm speaking from experience, so it's just, yeah.
Hey, that wasn't even an unjustified tangent.
Really?
That's a future preview for an Oscar episode.
Oh, hey. Well, that's going to be fun. We got to record more of those because I was having a lot of fun on that show, so and it was certainly very enjoyable. Now, number 7 for me, I've said this many a time on every show. I am a horror comedy fan through and through. That is probably the genre, if you made me pick one, that I'm like, yeah, it's probably my favorite genre, just because I love the bending of it. Number 7 is one of my top 5 films of all time. I adore it. It's Tucker and Dale versus Evil. It is, to me, so smart, while also just having some of the greatest kill scenes in horror history. And they're all done for comedic effect, which makes it better. And then what's so funny is when you get lulled into this sense of, oh, we're just having a good time, we're laughing at ridiculous circumstances. Then they throw in a few moments of horror, and it actually can get you, because you're like, oh, I was off guard. I was not ready for this one. Okay. To this day, I've rewatched that movie constantly. If I have a bad day, I'm like, it's Tucker and Dale day. You know, if Ab walks into the room after work and I'm watching Tucker and Dale, she just immediately knows, oh, today was a bad day. Got it. Okay. But some of the greatest kill scenes you will ever see in a movie are in Tucker and Dale. With no context, the wood chipper scene is one of my favorite things I've ever seen, ever, because it's just so ridiculous. It's so good. I adore Tucker and Dale versus Evil, number 7 spot.
I saw that for the first time last year. I had a good time. You know me. Horror comedy, I enjoy it, but it's not really my thing.
It's not your cup of tea that's going to really drive you. Yeah.
Like, I prefer, like, Shaun of the Dead more.
Okay.
I think just because I like Simon Pegg more than I like Alan Tudyk and the other guy in.
Yeah. It's Taylor something. It's going to drive me crazy now. But yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Shaun of the Dead played on my list. Spoiler alert, there's no Shaun of the Dead on this list. I love the interplay between the horror scenes and the comedy, and I think it's just meshed so well. And they never take their foot out of the horror realm. They always have their foot there, and it's just how much pressure do they put down on that side of the line. Really works for me. I also adore any movie that can take a genre and just flip it on its head. I love the idea that this is all just a giant misunderstanding, and these hillbillies are just trying, the hillbillies are just trying to have a vacation home, and then essentially they're being hunted for misunderstandings and circumstantial evidence, as opposed to them going out and killing college kids. So I just love that.
It's fun to watch the douchey college kids die too.
Yes, so. It is. You're just rooting for those kids to die half the time.
Yeah.
And it's always fun for me because even though this wasn't a season that I watched, there is a Power Ranger in that movie that I'm like, hey, what's up, Red Ranger? How you doing? I can't remember his name. It's the one with the dreadlocks. He was the Red Ranger in Power Rangers SPD, so it always gives me like a weird transitional moment where I'm like, hey, something I love from my childhood transitions to something
there has to be like 20-something seasons or 20 different variations of that fucking.
Oh, yeah. No, they're clearly in season like 30-something at this point. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Oh, yeah. No, it's... And that series now lives through nostalgia. Like that, almost every season now, the big thing is they bring back a new Ranger, or bring back an old Ranger. And like, it's never explicit, like, we have to have this, but it's so abundantly clear that that's what their tactic is. It's like, how do we make this relevant? Why don't we just bring back an old Ranger? And then it also sucks because their standby that would make the most impact has passed away, and Jason David Frank, so like they can't go back to their most popular character. Mm-hmm. And then their second most popular character wants nothing to do with them, essentially, because they never treat her well. And so like Amy Jo Johnson, who's clearly the best actress that's ever came out of that genre, you know, where she actually did real television shows and real stuff, they never really want to pay her or really treat her well. So she's just like, why? Like, why would I do this? So it's and there's just a bunch of controversial stuff about it. So not what I was expecting to talk about in a top 10 horror movie thing.
Definitely not.
But a fun one to talk about nonetheless. Now, before we go to our number 6 picks, we're going to take you this quick message. We'll see you on the flip side. Hey, you. Yeah, you. I'm talking to you. You trying to get your platform to grow? So am I. And I want to help you out. Let's help each other out. I'm trying a new thing on my podcast and all of my weekly content. I have content Monday through Saturday on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Spotify, all kinds of different platforms, and I want to help you grow as well. So now, if you like, comment, subscribe on this video, or follow wherever you may be, you may get a shout out in one of my next projects. That's what I'm going to try to do for you because you're small-time creators just like me, and I want us both to grow. So like, comment, subscribe for more, follow wherever you can. Tell me a little bit about yourself, and I'll try to help you out as well by giving you a shout out. Let's go do this together. Peace. All right, small-time creators, you heard it. Hit us up. Give that like, comment, subscribe. We're back to number 6. I'll lead off number 6 on this one. I'll stay horror comedy. The horror comedy of a genre. Evil Dead 2. So good. So good.
Yeah.
I'm adore
Evil Dead 1 kind of guy more, but I understand why everyone loves Evil Dead 2.
Evil Dead 2 is just so superior to the original Evil Dead that I just love the fact that Sam Raimi essentially was like, okay, Evil Dead 1, I had fun. Evil Dead 1 feels like a good student film, and then someone saw it and said, I want you to play in this world again, but we gotta clean some shit up. But here's a little bit of money. Go make it.
No, it just is like, I want you to remake that with more money.
Yes. And then he retells the entire story of Evil Dead 1 within the first 10 minutes, and it's such efficient filmmaking. And again, there's still some decent horror movie elements in there, very much atmospheric, just classic tales of in the woods, fog, things are freaking you out, and then the unexplained starts to happen. It just adds more and more tension. You're not going to find a much better slapstick comedy movie either. Bruce Campbell he was born for that genre. You know, he is that genre, frankly, to a degree. But I just enjoy the atmosphere building of that so much. And the stakes go from like, weird stuff to interdimensional time travel bullshit. It's like, that's fun. It's enjoyable.
Yeah, that's true. At the very end, yeah.
Yeah.
And the energy of the camera work from Sam Raimi is like ridiculous in that movie.
Oh god, that's cocaine fueled camera work if I've ever seen it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's ever true for Sam Raimi. I don't know anything about Sam Raimi in that sense, but
he seems kind of like a square, honestly.
Right. It's just he is such a unique filmmaker. He makes very rarely you're gonna watch a Sam Raimi film and be like, oh, Sam Raimi made this? Wouldn't have known. You always know Sam Raimi is making his movies. And they're just really enjoyable pieces to watch because the camera work is insane. I really adore the camera work in which the scenes in which Ash is losing his hand and his just insanity is taking him before the rest of them all kind of get there, where the taxidermied deer is like turning its head on its neck and like speaking to him. Other taxidermy is talking to him. Like other crazy shit's happening, and it's just the constant cuts and the constant facial work and things of that nature. Just really fun stuff. It's just such a fun movie as well. I love Evil Dead 2. It's so good. It's just so good.
It is good. I would recommend the first one.
And also and then in a serious tone, I love the fact that he built such a framework that now there's a new franchise that's strictly horror in Evil Dead. And
that's true.
And the Fede Alvarez stuff is very good. I really enjoyed it.
I thought Evil Dead Rise was actually surprisingly fun.
They're just good movies because they have a real rich world to play in. That's the best. It's a great world builder when you don't think he's world building. That's a really good.
Also,
it's a really fun thing.
Talk about an underrated performance. The woman in that who gets possessed, she's fantastic in that movie.
Oh yeah, tremendous. No, the 2013 Evil Dead by Fede Alvarez just kind of like went under the radar, and the people who saw it loved it, but it never broke further into that rank where people.
Yeah.
But anybody who sees it usually goes, "Holy shit, this is really good." I really thought about putting that on there, but there were just too many spots that I was like, I gotta play in this world.
Yeah.
Take us to number 6.
My number 6 is the original, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974.
Okay. Hit us up.
So this is one movie where I remember watching it when I was younger, probably like, I don't know, young teenager.
Sure.
And I was just kind of compared it to like, Friday the 13th, Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, all the classic slashers.
It gets thrown into the slashers. Yes.
Yeah, it kind of is like that a little bit. But when you go back and watch it, it is so completely different than those movies.
Okay.
Like, the amount of atmosphere in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is crazy. Like, it feels disgusting. And it feels like just a hot Texas summer. And it just feels grimy and disgusting. And, like, you're out in this, like, bumfuck middle of nowhere town in Texas.
Yeah.
Where you're, like, close to a slaughterhouse and shit. It is, like, the most disgusting, like, places you'll see in film.
Yeah.
And then you add to that, like, pretty truly horrific things going on. But it's not, like, obviously they can't get away with what you can get away with now.
Yeah.
With the censors back then.
They were pushing the boundary, though. They were trying.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, they were. But, like, nothing's really that gory.
Sure.
It's just suggestive. But even with that, I think they managed to do, like, really great things. Some of the characters are a little annoying, but
that's the horror genre in general. You always got to have a few.
Well, in this one particular, though, there's one character in particular who he's also in a wheelchair, so it makes him like really unsympathetic and also really annoying. So it's like, ooh, not great.
But the thing about it is I've pieced together part of that movie, but I've never really watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre because I'm not a slasher guy. Because half the time slashers, it's gratuitous to the point where I'm just like, okay, I love the idea of the slasher, but I don't love the execution slasher.
I would recommend the first two as a double feature because the first one is completely different from the second one. It's kind of like Evil Dead a little bit, where the second one is pretty much a horror comedy.
Okay.
Because it's Dennis Hopper as the lead, and they just go fucking wild with it.
Hell yeah, dog.
But the first one's like it's a small budget and pretty amateur actors in it, but you have what's that guy's name? The guy who's like the drill sergeant in Full Metal Jacket.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, Arlie Ermy, I think is his name.
Okay.
Who's like that iconic asshole guy.
Yep.
Yeah, he's fantastic. He's like the only face you'll ever recognize in the movie. Okay. Other than that, it's just all unknowns.
Which I like. I usually love. That's another thing I usually love about the horror genre. Is they don't get many, if any, big name actors. So
yeah,
it's a reward. It's a treat if you know them. But it's also, it's why I'm always a fan of like the big superheroes or the big franchises. Get an unknown to play your main character, and then fill the rest of the movie with faces so that you have your star power. Because it allows, when you have unknown actors, it allows you to buy into the character more. You don't see. It's one of the things that works really, really well about Deadpool. It's so obvious that Ryan Reynolds is that character, but when he's in the suit, you're just like, okay, it's Deadpool. You don't go, that's Ryan Reynolds playing Deadpool. You go, well, that's just Deadpool. It works really well to that nature, where I love that about the horror genre. So often you're like, I don't fucking know any of these people. And it just allows you to go, here's the story. Here we go. You don't do a lot more of the oh shit. It's not like you don't have the opposite effect. You're like, oh, it's Brad Pitt playing this character.
Yeah.
Brad Pitt died. You're like, oh shit. The kid named Ronnie died.
You do get Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger later sequels.
True. It's very true. But
it's a very odd movie.
But a fun one nonetheless. I'll take number 5 for now. Still playing a little bit in my horror comedy genre, but far more horror based than comedy based. Again, incredibly smart film, Cabin in the Woods. I adore Cabin in the Woods. I love anything. As a comic book fan, I love anything that can just take decades of history and just say, make this make sense together. And the way they do that in that movie is so smart. And I love how they start off all 5 of those characters definitely not as stereotypes. The only one who's stereotypical one is the stoner. Everyone else is very non-stereotypical, and then through intervention, they become stereotypical. And it's
I don't remember a single thing about that movie. I saw it one time when it first came out. Couldn't tell you a single. I think Chris Hemsworth is in it.
Yes,
that's what I remember.
Well, that's the thing that I also love about it. Cabin in the Woods is released in 2012, but it's shot in 2009. So Hemsworth is that thing that just went through like production hell and a bunch of other stuff, and it just kind of sat on the shelf. And I think eventually they finally made the push, and they saw Hemsworth was in Avengers, and they're like, "Oh, now's the time." Which is just fun to watch, kind of how the studio process works a little bit. It makes you understand it. Even if you disagree with it, you're like, well, it's not inherently stupid to do that if you're gonna, you don't think you have any stars in this movie. outside of one cameo appearance, there's no stars in that movie, so it's pretty smart to do that. I just adore everything that's done in that movie. The action sequences are tremendous. The horror sequences are tremendous. I love that the intro is so what you're not expecting. It's just so different from anything that you've ever seen. And then they really just jump into stuff that the atmosphere just keeps getting built in a lot of fun ways. And then to get to the ending sequences where you're like, holy shit. Spoiler alert, there's a ton of monsters released at the end that's so much fun.
I do remember that part.
And
yes.
it was funny. I was just talking to Angelo about it just a day or two ago when we went to the Packer game. And he's like, oh, I saw that in theaters. And every time a monster was released, or when they released all those monsters, the entire theater lost their fucking mind and they went from to like in the theater like cheering because it's like just so much fun. And I think that's the thing that is very hard in horror to do. Is usually horror movies that are a lot of fun, they're not super scary. And then horror movies that are really scary, it's very easy to kind of just go, and that lives in a part of my brain that I don't touch, and they almost kind of like disappear, kind of like The Descent. I feel like The Descent for like 5 years really freaked the fuck out of people, and then now it's just kind of like people forget about it because they put it in the deep recesses of their mind to not think about it.
And you often don't want to revisit it.
Yes. And Cabin in the Woods has a lot of fun to it where people want to come back and revisit that movie. Mm-hmm. And Drew Goddard just does such a great job directing that movie. It's a lot of fun.
Because I have it right here. Is the girl from The Boys in it?
I don't know.
I can't remember her name in The Boys.
What character are you referring to in The Boys?
The lead who plays the superhero.
Oh, Starlight? No, I don't think that's Erin Moriarty. No.
Oh. There's a girl who looks strikingly like her in a picture on the back.
A little bit. Huh. Physical media at its finest, though, baby.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about having all those. I don't have to go looking on streaming for any of that shit.
But fun film nonetheless. That's one of those movies that if people want to get into the genre, I recommend that one a lot. Same thing with Tucker and Dale because it's such an easy transition in, and I always go like Tucker and Dale, then go to Cabin in the Woods because you have similar vibes, but you're getting closer and closer to the horror genre. Then start exploring a little bit more of those bigger things.
Yeah, those two, and then like Get Out would be another good one. Yeah. Like a good where it gets into horror, but not scary.
Yeah.
My number 5, we don't have to talk about much because we did a full episode on, is The Exorcist.
Exorcist is at number 3 for me. I'm floored at how much that has flown up my rankings. So
mine as well. It would not have been on my top 10 before our episode.
There was no chance that would have been on my list prior to that episode. 0.
Yeah. I would have had quite a few movies above it. I know it probably would have been like closer to 15, I would guess, if I had made a list.
Okay.
So it made a huge jump, which I'm glad to see.
Big jump. So we'll talk a little bit more about it at 3, but obviously we'll keep telling you. Go back and watch when we were under the ONETA Movie Show banner. That was episode 3, I want to say, of the show, was The Exorcist. So you're going to get a lot of commentary on The Exorcist in that episode.
Yeah, that was part of the big box office.
Yeah, big box office series. That was great. All right, takes to number 4 then. What's your number 4?
My number 4 is The Shining.
Okay, Shining was one that played close to my list but didn't make it. So why is that so high on your list?
I watch it twice a year. I love that movie.
It's a great movie. It's tremendous.
Infamously, Stephen King hates the adaptation for some reason, even though it's viewed as like widely viewed as the best Stephen King adaptation.
It's The Shining is the reason people want every book of Stephen King's adapted.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to argue about anything being better than that.
I can't think of a single one.
I know a lot of people argue about why am I blanking on her name right now? Shelley Duvall. Yeah, Shelley Duvall's performance. I think she's great in it. Especially when you hear about all the behind the scenes things about how she was tortured by Stanley Kubrick and Jack Nicholson. And I think it has a top 3, top 5 performance by a kid in a movie ever.
It's pretty damn good.
Danny Lloyd in that movie is like pretty fantastic. And obviously it's easy to overlook Jack Nicholson because he's good in everything. But
this is a tour de force. It's a tour de force of an actor.
He's iconic.
And his descent into mania is so good.
Yeah.
It's just tremendous.
It's just like such a... For how contained the movie is, it's set in just the Overlook Hotel.
Yeah.
It still feels epic.
Yes.
Somehow.
It has scope to it. They do a really...
Yeah.
I think what's so smart about it is they have so many establishing shots, and they have so many shots in which the ballroom is shown, and it's like the whole thing, and they just look so small in it. They have so many... Even like the kitchen sequences and things of that nature, you see the full thing, and it just feels so isolating and alone. And the tone is set so well through the cinematography that it's very easy to buy into the isolation causing problems. And sadly, Shelley Duvall's own mental illness probably for this movie works really well. Now, granted, I don't know how far back her mental illness was really taking her out of that milieu, but she has such a convincing performance. And through the movie you can tell production was taking its toll. Like, she's withering away. And because of the setting and because of the story, it works really well for the story. It sucks to hear how much that took out of her as a human being, but nonetheless, from the movie perspective, it adds a lot.
Yeah. Also, one other thing I just want to say real quick: it's really nice to see a movie where it takes place in the snow and it actually feels like it's cold.
Yeah.
Like, there are so many movies nowadays where it's set in some place where it's supposed to feel cold and it's supposed to be snowy, but it just feels like completely fake.
CGI snow, baby.
So annoying. And I hate it as someone from Wisconsin who knows snow. It's so annoying.
I think it's frustrating anytime you see any environment and you're like, what the fuck? It kind of goes back to one of the most infamous comments we had with... I don't know how it comes up every fucking episode we do, but with Madam Web. Do you remember Ab's commentary when she's in the jungle? She's like, hold on, bitch went into the jungle with jeans and a JanSport and her hair is down. What the fuck is that? Like, she's like, that was the thing that broke her. The medical stuff broke her already, but she wanted to try, and that was the moment that atmosphere matters. Climate matters. Whoa. Those things matter, and it just breaks you if you're like, what the fuck? What are we doing?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like back in the day when they would use asbestos for snow, like, you can tell. Yeah, it looks fake.
And atmosphere matters. Part of atmosphere is where you are and how does it feel. It has to feel tangible. It has to feel real. When you're watching Empire Strikes Back, Hoth feels real. You can see the cold. You can see the danger in hypothermia. You can see the danger of that barren landscape of Hoth. I only bring that up because it's the most prominent usage of snow in a movie probably ever in terms of an atmosphere builder to how it's setting the scene. When The Shining is constantly showing cold breath, and you can tell things were just done properly to show that it matters. Now, Stanley Kubrick, on the other hand, is just a madman who's obviously a tremendous director, but he's a madman. So
I would say obsessive, not a madman, but
obsessive
sure.
for certain. The fact that he feels the need to torture his female lead, not great.
I've heard stories that it's a little bit overblown, but I don't know how much validity there is to that.
Well, I never heard Jack Nicholson was in on that as well. It's more just Kubrick was just abusive fuck.
I've heard different things, so I shouldn't say
okay.
with authority anything.
Okay. But it's a tremendous movie nonetheless. It's a movie in which it's really easy as a modern audience member to put off, especially now that it's nearly 45 years old. And we're reaching that. We're reaching the 50-year mark pretty soon, and it's so easy for a lot of those older movies to kind of just go, no one really talks about it anymore. So whatever.
Still looks fantastic.
It looks fantastic, and it's so easy for a modern audience member to skip something like this. I myself skipped it for a lot of years. I was like, I was just never in the mood to watch it. And then finally I was like, I'm just going to watch this. Finally going to do it. I think it was because Dr. Sleep was coming out. I was like, I just want to understand what the fuck this is about. And I was like, wow, this is tremendous. And then watching The Shining and then watching Dr. Sleep, you're like, not the same experience.
What did you think of Dr. Sleep, just real quick?
I enjoy it, but it's nowhere near as good as The Shining.
Yeah, I agree. Same exactly.
I think Dr. Sleep is a fun movie. The Shining is a great movie. That's tremendous in all what it does. Now, from The Shining, take you to number 4. I'll go even older than that. The one that starts it all, Night of the Living Dead. 1968's Night of the Living Dead is a must-watch in my brain during the Halloween season. The aspects, again, it sets the tone for that entire zombie movie genre. Zombie movie genre is really... The zombie genre pretty much should have its own category at this point. It's no longer just part of the horror genre anymore because there's been so many movies done about it and things of that nature, but it sets the entire tone. And I
feel like zombies a lot more than I thought you did.
I fucking love zombie movies. I have no problem with it. I love that shit. Because I also love how malleable that genre is. You can get something as funny as Zombieland, which I obviously love, and was a big favorite of ours, and still is a big favorite of ours, to you can get Night of the Living Dead and 28 Days Later and World War Z, and all of them feel extremely different. Even the Living Dead genre, because they never copyrighted that phrase because it was an independent movie, everyone can make their own Living Dead movie, and it doesn't matter. Even that, there's even a subgenre of just Living Dead movies, then they all have their own feel. It's really, really fun and enjoyable to make that I utterly adore.
Yeah. I'm due for a rewatch on Night of the Living Dead, because I've only seen it a couple times. I own the Criterion Collection version release of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a classic. It's like undeniably one of the most influential horror movies made. Yeah. So can't argue against it.
And again, it's not as if the acting performances are great. It's not.
No,
you're not seeing hordes and hordes. You're not seeing hordes and hordes of zombies like you would in a normal or in a modern movie. What you're seeing is atmosphere. What you're seeing is fear. What you're seeing is paranoia. You are seeing the finest example of panic.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a good movie to explain panic. What takes somebody from rational, reasonable person to, oh my god, the world's ending. And how quick that can happen.
Yeah, and George Romero, he doesn't do it too well at the end of his career, but at the beginning he does a really good job of putting social commentary, but not like hitting you over the head with it.
He's lot of good social commentary. Yes.
But just kind of showing you.
Yes.
Not telling you how to feel about it.
And his work with that in Night of the Living Dead is tremendous. Again, casting a black lead in a 1968 movie that you're already taking a lot of rolls of the dice on, and it becomes uber successful because it becomes the drive-in movie for an entire age group, to where kids of the 70s and the 80s are still, it's like, oh, Night of the Living Dead's playing, we gotta go. You know, it's like, we gotta go. And you're rolling the dice so many times in that movie, producing it and directing it, in which, like, okay, I'm going to cast a black lead. I'm going to make this a female-driven movie, really. I'm going to portray violence and interracial violence in ways. And you're like, that's a lot of dice rolls on a movie that it's theoretically just about, I don't know, people in makeup going, ugh. You know?
Mm-hmm.
But if you actually look at the substance of that movie, you're like, that's actually really bold for the time period.
Yeah. I think a good double feature would actually be the movie that won Best Picture the year before. It's In the Heat of the Night. Sidney Poitier is the lead in it.
Okay.
And it's just a small town, like, murder mystery where Sidney Poitier is a detective from the north, and he's in a small town in the south, and he's trying to solve a crime with the town sheriff, who's a racist and an asshole.
Naturally.
But I think those two would actually be like really interesting dichotomies.
Yeah.
That might actually be a double feature I do this Halloween season.
Be worthwhile. But just a really fun experience, and it's a quicker movie. And it's not paced for a modern audience. So a modern audience, if you are watching this, you're like, oh, I've never watched it, I want the push. Be prepared. It's a slower movie, especially compared to zombie movies that you're seeing in today's world. But there's so much good substance to it.
Yeah, if you've seen Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, don't go in expecting that.
No, that's not the movie you're getting. Just not the vibe. But it's tremendous on its own nonetheless. Now, before we hit our top 3, we're going to have one more message for you. Stay tuned. Hey friends, I know you're enjoying this show, but we want to prime you for a new show. Go check out the weekly schedule over at PTE Creative and find your new favorite podcast or show to watch. Monday and Thursday, you get the Far Out Football podcast with news, analysis, and notes of the NFL season, plus great projects during the off-season like draft analysis and what-if questions like what if the NFL expanded. Tuesday, go to the ONETA Show for absurd takes and fun all around. The topics in entertainment, gaming, movies, television, you name it, ONETA Show is going to talk about it. Wednesday, you can go check out the Pokemon Bliss Oblivion Project, in which new Pokemon are being designed every single week as we create the Halzari Fakemon region. Friday, it's kind of a fun, laid-back day over at PT Creative. You can go open some brand new Pokemon card packs, or get some new specials and seasonal content coming your way on a Friday. And finish your week out with the Wisco Movie Watchers podcast on Saturdays. Get great movie recommendations, learn some movie history, and just have a grand old time listening to some dialogue. It's going to be a whole heck of a lot of fun over on Saturdays, just like it is every single day over at PTE Creative. Go check out new podcasts, new content, new shows every single Monday through Saturday over at PTE Creative. Now enjoy the rest of your show. Top 3 time, friends. Listen to us anywhere you want to on that Spotify ad. But it's top 3 time. I will lead us off here because we've already discussed it a bit. Let's go straight to The Exorcist. What a tremendous movie. The more and more I think about The Exorcist, the more and more I respect it. Because there's just something so special about it. Obviously, we don't have to go into all the depths of it, because, like we already talked about, go back and track it down in the playlists on YouTube or on Spotify. We do an entire episode devoted just to that movie as part of the Big Box Office series, as it was the largest hit of 1973. But such a tremendous film. Atmosphere up the fucking wazoo. That's what I'm sensing. That's the connective tissue in all of my movies. Is you have to hit atmosphere for me. I don't think horror is just, did it scare you? It's like Pleasantville is scarier to me than most slasher movies because it's just creepy and I just don't like it. You know, so I'm like, it's not all about scaring people. It's about substance in which you're giving me.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked about this a lot in that episode. The amount of tension and fear built in broad fucking daylight is so impressive that when you do get those little tiny bits of supernatural horror until you get to the full-on possession of Reagan is so impressive.
Yeah.
And a true masterpiece of the genre.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think because it's always called the scariest movie ever made, that's kind of like, it takes away from it now.
It does.
Because everyone goes in expecting that, when really it's more horrifying than it is scary.
Yes.
Because it really isn't, it's not a scary movie, really. Like, I never get scared during the movie.
I'm never scared during that movie. We brought it up in
the ideas behind it are what's horrifying about it.
Absolutely. If you look at just trying to scare me, I'm far more terrified of The Descent, my honorable mention, than I am of The Exorcist.
Sure. Yes.
I'm fucking terrified in The Descent. Whereas, I didn't bat an eye during The Exorcist. I just kept eating up, just going like, this is so good, this is so good. But it's not about just scaring people. It's not that simple. You have to have more substance, and The Exorcist has such good substance. It's chef's kiss. Clearly Friedkin's best work. What's Friedkin's more modern stuff?
Well, just before he did The Exorcist, he did The French Connection, which was Best Picture in 1971.
Yeah.
Then after that, he did Sorcerer, which is like a thriller. And then I can't remember what he did after that, honestly. But he never did anything like as big.
Yeah.
As he was hitting in the 70s.
Yeah. It's very different milieu.
Unfortunately, there are those directors that just hit off in a decade and then just vanish.
He was one of them. He was certainly one of them.
Yeah. Like, they make their impression in the film industry and then who knows?
And then they, peace, I'm out.
Yeah. Okay, my number 3 is 1991 Best Picture winner, The Silence of the Lambs.
Well, I'll say it right now, that's my number 2, so we can just straight up talk, because then it'll skip my number 2 as well, so...
Alright.
What a tremendous movie.
Amazing.
The work in that movie is so good.
It's such a off-putting movie because Jonathan Demme's like camera work in it is intentionally off-putting.
Yes.
Like the amount of like close-up shots that you get on just these creepy men staring at Clarice in it are just like, oh god, like
it's a textbook on making people feel unsettled.
Yeah. And I mean, we did a whole week about it when I was at college for film school. Like the male gaze of it all. Like that whole movie is the male gaze.
Yeah. The amount, because if you really look at it, it's a psychological thriller. It's not necessarily a horror movie.
Yeah.
But I'm far more freaked out by Silence of the Lambs in many ways than I am in pretty much every movie I brought up.
Mm-hmm.
Silence of the Lambs is a defining film in my time as a movie watcher. I caught it. I had heard it was a big movie, and that was it. And it was just kind of like the fable of Silence of the Lambs, but I never got anything more than that. It was just the one time I heard it was like a big deal, and I caught it on cable when I was in my later teens, or maybe I was like 16, something like that. And I just sat down, and it completely transformed my time as a movie watcher. That's where I really get into. That informs my vision of what a horror is supposed to be. It's not about slash, kill, gore. Bleh. It's about the substance in what you're making, and can it make you feel unsettled? Can it terrify you in more than one way? That movie does not rely on jump scares. It does not rely on gore. It does not rely on it relies so much on camera work, atmosphere, dialogue, performance. The performance given between Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah. Anthony Hopkins is, I don't know, 30 minutes of the movie, maybe. And his impression in that movie is like, you go away thinking about him probably the most.
Yes. And
Hannibal Lecter is like an undeniable part of the cultural zeitgeist.
Yes.
Like, still.
It makes an indelible mark upon pop culture to where everybody can make a Hannibal Lecter reference. And that's the craziest part about this, Buffalo Bill is creepy, scary, so well done. Ted Levine does such a good job with that character. Anyone else plays Hannibal Lecter, this is still a great movie. And people talk about Buffalo Bill as like this creepy thing. No one says a word about it because Anthony Hopkins is so good as Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah. I like, one of the things I don't understand about, like, when people make thrillers nowadays with like serial killer movies, I'm always just like, why aren't you taking details from real serial killers and just putting that in your movies? Because that's pretty much all they did.
Yes.
They just took Ted Bundy and Ed Gein and pushed it together, and then the audience knows people know Ted Bundy, people know Ed Gein. Like, they're gonna buy it, and they're gonna be fucking creeped out by it.
Both in a morbid way. All stars of the Wisconsin team.
No, not Ted Bundy.
Oh no, not Ted Bundy. I'm sorry. No, Dahmer. My apologies.
Dahmer.
Dahmer. My apologies. But yeah, there's just an unsettling portion of it because it's so real. Like, the Ed Gein portion of that hits home.
Yeah.
And not even like, I'm from Wisconsin, it hits home. Just, it hits home in this weird, you feel people in danger because of it.
Yeah.
It's so unsettling. Side note, there should never be any celebration of a serial killer, but we are all as humans are fascinated by it.
Yeah.
If there was a serial killer all-star team, half that team is fielded by the state of Wisconsin, so
unfortunately,
it's an interesting tale to say the least. Where I was like, two of that starting five on the all-star team are certainly Wisconsinites, so maybe there is something to that seasonal affective disorder really playing with the mind.
And then you can throw in another one that's about, I don't know, 40 minutes away.
Yeah.
With Gacy.
Yeah, it's
in Chicago.
Yeah, so. Midwest, we're doing well on creating these serial killers, man. We gotta slow it down here. We gotta slow it down.
Yeah, apparently. That Midwestern kindness only goes so far.
Only goes so far. We as the Wisco Movie Watchers, our kindness can only go so far, apparently.
Yeah.
Our home state and our home region really doing a number on some people psychologically. But you're correct. Why don't you take things that you see, things that you hear, and use them to your advantage in a storytelling sense? You're not celebrating that person. They're not making Ed Gein the movie. you know, which is why the whole reason when they made that Netflix show with Evan Peters and it was Dahmer, I was like, why are you doing this? Who does this serve? You know?
Yeah.
I was like, what are you doing?
I only watched like 4 episodes of it, but they did do a fairly good job of like showing him as just a weird fucking person.
Yeah.
Like, which is just the truth. Like,
yes.
Jeffrey Dahmer was just a weird fucking guy.
Yes.
Which probably all of those people probably were just weird fucking people.
Yes.
So, and you do get that with Silence of the Lambs. Like, Buffalo Bill is just a weird person too.
Yes. Even when they're trying to pretend to be normal, they're just not. They can't even function to pretend.
Yeah, there's just something off about them.
Yes, and it's so well done in Silence of the Lambs. The intro to that movie is scary. And it's not scary at all visually. It's just it's just sets, the music, color, lighting. You're just following a woman through the woods. It's all you're doing.
Yeah.
And she's running the obstacle course as part of the FBI. That's it. And from the moment the movie starts, you're just like, oh, I'm in for a ride. I'm in for one of our best friends. Her favorite movie by far is Silence of the Lambs. And unabashedly, she's favorite movie of all time. It's so good. She's fascinated by psychological thrillers. She's fascinated by serial killers and things of that nature. She's like Silence of the Lambs. She's like, that's the greatest movie ever made. She won't hear anything else. And it's one of those movies where I can't even in fun debate, I can't even be like, no. I'm like, yeah, she's got a point.
Mm-hmm.
She's got a point.
Yeah, one of the only movies to win all of the big 5 of the Oscars. So picture, director, actor, actress, and then a screenplay.
It's pretty fucking
award. That's pretty impressive.
Was Levine nominated for supporting actor?
No.
I would have thought about that, but
yeah, I mean, I could see how he could deserve it, but I think they just get everyone else just gets overshadowed in that movie.
Yeah, because I also think
Jodie Foster in that movie is also amazing. Like we'd be remiss if we didn't at least mention her.
Yes, it's so her portrayal. That, I mean, by far that's her greatest performance. And it's...
I don't know about that, but sure.
I mean, it's obviously the thing she's going to be remembered for forever.
Sure, I'd agree with that. Yeah.
And that's probably the better way of saying it. But her performance is one in which you have such sympathy for her. And there's not a lot to be sympathetic of in terms of what they tell you. Obviously, her backstory's awful. That sucks. Mm-hmm. But they don't focus on that much. And what's happening...
No, not really.
And
you only get like 2 flashbacks, I think.
Yeah, and you're not... Through the process of the movie, you're not given this whole thing of like, we should sympathize with Clarice. We should really just always give her the benefit of the doubt. You give her the benefit of the doubt because it's the character, lens that you're watching the movie through. Mm-hmm. But it's not because you're like, I just feel so bad for Clarice. I just feel... It's like, no. She's essentially a detective doing her goddamn job. And yet, there's just such a sympathy and care for that character through her performance that it's tremendous.
Yeah. Yeah, so, one of the things I love about Clarice in it is, like, she's not a white knight at all.
No.
Like, in a lot of thrillers, you get the white knight detective where they can do no wrong, really. And they're always going to solve the crime at the end of the day.
Yeah.
There's times when, like, Clarice, you don't know if she's going to pick up on the actual clues that she should.
Yeah. And you can tell there's a process where she's not perfect. That's what I love about it. She is just a human being doing her job. And it just seems that her job in this movie is wildly interesting. So
yes.
It's fun to see. What a tremendous movie. What a good movie. So good. We could talk about Silence of the Lambs forever.
That was your 2?
That was my 2, so you can take your 2.
Okay. My 2 was mentioned earlier. Psycho.
That is very high for Psycho.
It's one.
Not unwarranted.
One of my favorite movies of all time.
Not unwarranted. I think it's solely because of when I've watched it. I just watched Psycho for the first time 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
So here's what I will say about Psycho and why it was on my list, but it's not super high on my list. The success of this movie is what I've talked about forever. Its atmosphere. There is an unsettling nature to everything in that movie. That's the success of that movie. The shots in that movie are also pretty interesting. It's more so the overall kind of story. I'm like, yeah, it's fine.
Well, it's hard to watch it nowadays when you don't know like the significance of it, where like you don't know how big of a deal it was to kill off your main character within the first 40 minutes.
Yes.
Like, no one expected Janet Leigh to die in the movie.
No.
Like, that's why the shower scene is such an iconic horror scene.
Yes. I will tell you this, that still makes an impact today, because as someone who... I know plenty about the movie. I know the twist at the end. I know all that shit.
Yeah.
And yet, it's almost like a well-protected secret that people don't want to get out there in like circles, because I had no idea. I was like, I know the shower scene, and I'm like, doesn't she die in this? And I'm watching, and I'm like, we're like 38 minutes into this movie. Like, we about to kill this character off? This is the whole point of this character, is to follow her journey. And you're thinking it's going to turn into this. And then when you read the description of the film on just like the little blurbs that they put up on whatever streaming service it's on, it's always like, oh, woman in over her head finds herself in this thing. They never tell you a single thing about the rest of the movie. So you think this is going to turn into classic character in over their head. They find themselves in a situation trying to save themselves, and shit goes aside, and then at the end, maybe that happens. Nope. You're completely right, in which it is so impactful to have your main character die that quickly.
Yeah. And it's like Janet Leigh is probably, I shouldn't say the only recognizable face in it. Like, the other people, even at the time, weren't like, they weren't stars. No one in the movie was huge stars.
Yeah.
So, like, the fact that you're killing off your star is even a bigger deal.
Yeah.
Like, you're killing off the person who you're centering your movie around.
Right.
And then you're also trying to push boundaries where, like, you're not... It's hard to say, like... Because, like, even at the times, you couldn't get away with pretty much anything.
Yeah.
Like, you could still only kiss on screen for 4 seconds, I think it was. Like, Psycho was the first movie to show a flushing toilet. That's how strict things were back then.
So dumb.
So it's just like such a weird... You need to really understand the historical aspect of it to really, really appreciate it.
I think it's defining. Why,
because a lot of people will find it boring, I think, nowadays.
I did not find it boring. I will say that. I didn't find it boring.
I've heard, like, because, who was I talking to? Someone I was talking to was saying that their younger kids who were teenagers found it really boring and they didn't even finish it.
Wow.
So I was like, I guess I could understand that if they don't understand why, but I don't know.
I was floored by the.
Also, it's in black and white.
Yeah, and I love black and white, so that plays to my sensibility, but it doesn't play to everyone's sensibility.
I prefer black and white.
I love the black and white aesthetic. I think it's just such a endearing piece of media from the time. And it serves this movie really well. It serves the atmosphere of it. Because you have just such... I think black and white with horror is just... They're made for each other. You have just such stark contrasts in light. You have such stark contrasts character. And it's so easy with color theory to tell your story in black and white.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I love that. It goes back to a quote that it's not a horror movie, but I always remember to picking up details about Star Wars, where Mark Hamill was on the set he's like, I really wanted to be there for the first scene that they show Darth Vader. It's like, I wanted to feel that moment. And he asked Lucas when Lucas comes in, he's like, oh, you're not going to put any dialogue from that's Darth Vader, this is the Dark Lord of the Sith. You're not going to put any of that expositional stuff. And to Lucas's credit, he's just like, he's a big guy in a black suit. The whole thing's white. He's clearly doing something bad. They'll get it. It's just such economical ways to do it. And the reason I think about this in this context is it's the same fucking color palette. It's just black and white. It's all it is. Yeah. And the color palette can tell you so much about things in this movie, where even in the cabin rooms, they're pretty light and bright. And then when you go in to the Bates home, it's far more darker, rich aesthetics, where even the banisters are dark. Everything about it is dark. There's contrast, but the carpets are dark. The curtains are dark. You know, the wood paneling is dark. So it's very much has a very smart color palette to it as well. That's so good. I can understand why people who don't get it would be bored. I certainly wasn't, because I love the atmospheric build of it. Well,
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah,
the atmosphere is the best part about this movie. I think Anthony Perkins does a great job, but the atmosphere is where it's at.
Maybe it's more like a younger demographic that are expecting actual scares.
Yes, there's no scares in this movie. There's no scares.
I think there's one where it's like the overhead shot where she comes out and stabs the guy at the top of the stairs. Yeah, that's like the one scare.
Yes,
but that's about it.
Yeah, this movie's unsettling. It's not scary.
Yeah.
But it speaks to the quality of the film as well. To which it still made my list, and I was kind of like, okay, because I understood how good it was at one kind of thing. That was very fun, and also the intro pieces that you don't think would be important. They do a really good job where when she's being followed by the cop. You know, she's making irrational decisions, and yet you're still just like, at this point, just if you're not going to do anything, just leave her alone. and yet still that sense of being followed is
that's just pure Hitchcock tension building.
Yeah. So it is certainly very fun and interesting to watch, and it's a great way to learn. Again, I think that's one of the reasons I love doing this show and why I love getting to have these discussions with you, is because when you're in this place, you learn so much, and that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
All right, so before we hit our number ones, we're going to take one last ad break for you, and we'll hit our show back to you. Stay tuned. Howdy, fellow PT creative fans out there. We have a project near and dear to our hearts that we really want you to check out. Over on our YouTube channel, you can go check out the Pokemon Bliss Oblivion Project. It's one of our favorite projects we've ever gotten the chance to work on, where we're creating new Pokemon on a weekly basis and creating our own Fakemon region. They're called the Helzari region. There you're going to see new starter Pokemon, or as you can see to your right if you're on video, a new Eevee evolution. So many cool new Pokemon and vibes are going to be found here on the Pokemon Bliss Oblivion Project, and it's going to help your day out. Go support some art that you'd love to see, and go check out the Pokemon Bliss Oblivion Project, available every single Wednesday on PT Creative. Go check it out now. And we're back from our final break, and we have our final movie to talk about, our number ones, our top 10 horror. You want to do the honors? You want me to take the honor?
I can go first. I don't care.
Go for it.
Mine is... I had a real tough one choosing between Psycho and number one, but I ended up going with the original Halloween, 1978.
Wow, okay. Definitely not on my list, so...
I probably watch this movie 5 times a year.
It's a favorite of yours, yes.
Yeah, everything about this movie is iconic to me. Like, yeah. I love... The music in it is fantastic.
The music's phenomenal.
Yeah, and somehow it's shot in Southern California, but somehow it still feels like it's set in Illinois, but they somehow still make it feel like fall in the Midwest, even though it's shot in Southern California and you can see palm trees in the background when you look closely.
You can see California license plates. It's...
Yeah.
The attention to detail was not inherently there in the original Halloween.
Yeah, and then you get like 2 garbage bags full of leaves that they just throw in the foreground. It's great.
Yeah, it is. Hey, economical storytelling right there, man. Economical. I don't know, fall, throw some leaves, it'll be fine. It works.
Yeah. And then Jamie Lee Curtis, first movie, echoing her mom and Janet Leigh. I mean, what a breakout performance.
Yeah. I mean, it helps define her career to the point where it's still probably the thing she's known best for, from an overall audience perspective, not from our age group. She's definitely the mom role, or from people who kind of go my way into 80s movies, she's known for True Lies, or, you know, our generation far more knows her as the mom in Freaky Friday. It's kind of what Jamie Lee Curtis is known for. But overall of her career, it's definitely the role that's like, yeah, that's Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah. And there's no weak points in the movie, is what I really like about it. Like, a lot of slashers have weak points where I'm like, yeah, you can see it's shoddily made.
Yeah.
Whereas Halloween feels like they're not expert filmmakers, but everything feels like they're just good filmmakers.
Okay.
I love Halloween. I will always defend it whenever it comes up.
Yeah. No, I'm going to be honest, I don't know if I've ever watched this movie all the way through. I've definitely pieced it together, but I don't know if I've ever watched it all the way through. The other thing I will say this is, when I eventually do go back and watch the first of a genre, or the first of a franchise, I typically am very pleasantly surprised. Where I forced myself a couple years back to finally watch Nightmare on Elm Street, and I was like, you know what? I get it. I don't think it's nearly as good as everyone thinks it is.
Yes.
But Nightmare on Elm Street 1 is just so different and weird and unique that I was like, I get it. I can understand why people really like this movie. You know, the other stuff that I've seen in that franchise, I'm like, wow, those suck. I don't ever need to watch that. Right?
Yeah.
You know, Halloween suffers from that. Obviously, Halloween suffers from that. Obviously, Friday the 13th suffers from that. You know, Texas Chainsaw Massacre obviously starts suffering from that too. Where, it's diminishing returns, and it's all about essentially rooting on the main character who's a fucking killer. Just kill people.
Yeah.
So,
that's one of the nice things about Halloween is, like, you still are rooting for the actual protagonist for Michael Myers.
Yeah.
Like, you actually want your characters to survive. You don't want your big bad guy to win.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things that I do really... I kind of zone out when that kind of happens in the later sequel.
Yeah.
A lot. because like they kind of make the protagonists almost unlikable to a point where you want to watch them die.
Yeah, or they have so many characters around them that are annoying.
Yeah.
That you're building. It's what's funny to me is they have like a classic pro wrestling build in the opposite way for the slasher, where it's you start here and then you ramp up, right? And you're trying to build to the point where you're a credible threat for the champion.
Mm-hmm.
Those movies later on, when you're rooting for the villain, it's like you see one and you're like, oh, okay, they got their first one. And then the second kill is usually really fun and impressive. And then they just keep ramping it up to the point where like, oh, you've now hit the championship match. You gotta take this character out because we're here for the come up story. We're not here for the come down. You know, we want to see the achievement, and the achievement, sadly, in those movies is, did I muck duck everybody? So like, it's certainly a very interesting way to do it. Where you're good, you're right. In Halloween, you're still rooting for Jamie Lee Curtis. You're not rooting for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would also say, in terms of an ending, I would say it rivals The Silence of the Lambs in terms of one of the best horror endings.
Okay.
I don't want to go into it more than that because you haven't seen it, so...
Yeah, I appreciate it at the same time, though, so yeah.
Yeah, one of the best horror movie endings ever.
Okay. Impressive. And clearly a popular choice, but not inherently a wrong choice. That's a totally fine choice whatsoever. Number one, I stayed modern because I was just so impressed with that movie. It's Get Out. I think the world of Get Out. I already talked about social commentary. Get Out's social commentary is so abundantly obvious.
Mm-hmm.
But I really enjoy it because the vast majority of people that I've talked about the movie with, I've seen the movie with, whatever, when you watch Get Out, there's just such an inherent sympathy for your main character. And then when you assume the family's bad, but when he's eventually betrayed by his girlfriend in the same manner, it's such a nice little twist in which it's just twisting the knife, and you're like, can this motherfucker not get a break? Damn.
Yeah.
And what I love about it is it plays in the horror genre. It plays in the psychological horror genre, or thriller genre, I should say. It plays in such a social commentary way that's really fun and enjoyable. But it does unsettling very well. It does psychological thriller very well. It does horror very well. Where the panic in Daniel Kaluuya's performance is so good. And you feel the tension within that character so much. And I absolutely adore it. I
love the opening of it as well.
Yes.
Where Lakeith Stanfield's walking down the street.
Yeah.
And then the car's stalking him. Love that opening.
Alright. The opening is tremendous. The tension building is there the entire time. And the movie's honest. Where, the best friend the whole time's like, don't trust these fucking people. Like, what are you doing? Yeah. What are you doing? And he's right the entire time, and he's going to be right. That's the horror genre in a nutshell. That's the other thing I like about it, is it plays in... I love when a genre can take the old motifs and then use them to your advantage and still throw you off guard enough to where you go, nice. Like, It's nice to get that nostalgic feeling, but at the same time get something new with it. Get Out is just such a tremendous performance. I think Allison Williams' performance in that movie is also great. Everybody in that movie plays their role so well. And for a modern context, I would have to say Get Out's probably one of the best modern horror movies you'll ever see.
Sure.
And didn't that get a Best Picture nom?
Yes, it did.
And
it also won Best Original Screenplay.
as it should have. It was a tremendous film.
Yes.
And I'm glad it got the recognition it deserved. I remember when I saw the nomination come through, it's like, you got this one right, motherfuckers. I've been shitting on you for a while. You got this one right. I'll give it to you.
Yeah. There's some really strong, like, surreal images in it. Like, when they go into what is it called? When he, like, sinks down.
Yeah.
The sunken place.
Yes.
That's what it's called.
A lot of surreal stuff in there, too. I really enjoy that.
Yeah. I can't remember who tells it, if Jordan Peele himself tells it or if Daniel tells it. He tells a story where Jordan Peele pretty much just says, this shit's going to be iconic. And, I mean, he's right. Like, those visuals are iconic now, and in terms of horror visuals.
Well, I adore anybody who has the ego to say something like that and be right. It's obnoxious when you get some stuff and someone's like, it's gonna be iconic, and you're like, 99 times out of 100, if someone says this is gonna be iconic, it's going to exist for 2 days and not matter whatsoever.
Yeah.
I just get such James Cameron wanking himself off to his Avatar ideas when I hear that. But I adore the idea of Jordan Peele, who's usually just so soft-spoken, mild-mannered, and so many interviews just being
wildly intelligent as well.
He's so intelligent. Again, goes back to another topic that we talked about with comedy writing. And his foundations are in comedy. And yet here he is making iconic horror films that just kind of hard not to pay attention to. Get Out is so good. And I just love the bold, this shit's gonna be iconic. And you're like, nice.
Yeah. Pulled it off.
It's so good. Great movie. Utterly adorable.
I would actually argue it deserved... Well, I shouldn't say that. It will be a spoiler for the Oscar episode.
If you didn't get my tone, I would probably share the same sentiments. We'll talk about it. Now. We'll talk about it. What year is that? Was that 2017?
Yeah.
So we'll talk about it in our January Oscar episode. That's going to come around because we're doing one Oscar episode a month to build towards the actual ceremony. So that'll be in January's Oscar episode when we talk more Get Out. But what a great movie. A lot of fun. That was a good time. Overall, very different lists.
Yes, extremely.
But there wasn't any really disagreement in quality. That was the one thing I was like, okay. We're rolling the dice on this one because your taste in horror is very different from my taste in horror. So, in which I was waiting for a few bullets either way, or it's like, who's going to fire the first shot? So, it was fun to do. But nonetheless, very, very fun indeed to talk about. But we're getting you ready for a ton of good horror stuff. Hopefully you enjoy all this month's offerings. Or this coming months, whenever this movie... I can't remember when I slated this. It's either right before October or right after October. So it's right around the time that you're getting our full horror movie or our whole Halloween movie calendar, which is going to be a lot of fun. We got 2 different months to do, essentially, because I know Dylan's going to put out a very different product than I am myself. Yeah. So it's going to be a whole heck of a lot of fun. But keep checking us out, folks. Stay in touch with the socials. Enjoy your day and go watch a great movie. We'll catch you on the next episode of Wisco Movie Watchers Podcast. Peace, love, and hugs. Bye!